Hello, everybody. Looks like I'm back again with more weird spins, and this one should be a little extra weird because we're going to do 5 more random records. Psychomania is a British hippie era sort of psychedelic supernatural horror film about a motorcycle gang. It featured music by John Cameron and Frog. This is a tribute album with sort of new performances as a medley on the A side, performed by a band called Zoltan. It's on the Cineploit label, and I recommend buying absolutely anything and everything you find on this label, which is mostly bands doing film music tributes, but every single pressing that they do is spectacular and unique. The B-side of this is just a small collection of single rotation lock groove tracks of tiny sound bites from the movie. I wanted to stop a minute just to kind of do a little throwback. If you remember the previous video I did, I covered some 78s. A fella just was basically giving away or throwing away a carton of 78s, and so he put them up on Craigslist first for somebody to come by and take a peek, and I took them home with me and had a great time with them. Produced a little video, and since then turns out that he's looking to liquidate a pretty substantial collection of 78s, so I went over and did the first dig on the first chunk of them that he's willing to let me look at, that he was ready for me to look at, because he's wanting to keep some things. And I found some neat things in there and took home. Hopefully I'll be going back to see him again. But 78s will be a topic again in a future video, because some really kind of neat stuff did turn up. Random record number 2 is the title single from Buckner and Garcia's Pac-Man Fever. If you don't have this album, I recommend it. It's a guilty pleasure for me. I play it about once every 3 years, and I call it Zoloft on vinyl because you cannot be unhappy listening to this thing. It's cheerful, and the musicianship on it's very good. It's very ridiculous and nostalgic and a lot of fun. I can't recommend it enough. My copy of the single is this British press shaped picture disc. Oddly enough, the domestic single was on a styrene, and so this picture disc actually sounds much better, much fuller than the styrene does. It contains the same track on both sides, just like the US single. It's vocal on one side and instrumental on the other. Random record number 3. American post-deathcore is the best way to probably describe Fit for an Autopsy. If you like bands like Chimera, The Acacia Strain, or Suicide Silence, you'll probably appreciate what it is that this band does. Just imagine influx of some proggier elements that are like atmospherics into the work, which gives it kind of a conceptual feel, especially with this album cover, which has to be one of the most terrifying I've ever seen in my life. If this is what the future holds, then I don't think I want to be around for it, quite honestly. It's fitting that this album art would come from this particular band because they're very socially conscious and very geared towards trying to send messaging for change to avoid devastation, like is being illustrated here. And they have a reputation that precedes them of being very nice guys as well, so I kind of applaud them for doing that in their work. The album itself, the record itself, is on this really disgusting looking glow-in-the-dark vinyl with brown splatter in it, which kind of adds to the effectiveness of the whole ugly thing about the packaging. The record itself looking like it's somehow contaminated with something. Glow-in-the-dark vinyl is unavoidably crackly, so if you do seek out a copy of this album and you want this version, I would recommend then get a second variant as well. Number 4, and boy, what a backstory this artist has. It was the 1940s, and in America, some of Jim Crow laws were still at their worst. Some of the segregation laws were still at their worst, and a light-skinned African-American man from Missouri had moved to California to try to break into show business. And he was a very gifted musician, particularly at playing piano and organ. After quite a lengthy period of having failures there with trying to break into industry, he one day just put on a turban and basically started going to auditions announcing that he was a French Indian mix from New Delhi and that his name was Korla Pandit. And he passed. Not only did he pass, which he wouldn't have succeeded at doing had he tried to pass as white, but he passed as exotic, which made for quite a few extraordinary events in his life. So John Roland Redd was given a television show called Adventures in Music, and he would go on air, look directly into camera while he was playing, and say nary a word. And somehow he became a sex symbol and won over the hearts of white American housewives everywhere, which was absolutely unthinkable in this era, and I think was just amazing. Actually, from there, he was put into parades, he was given film appearances, he had a career of endless albums, and he carried this secret all the way to his grave, which was kind of an unfortunate thing that he would have to live this false life, but wow, what he achieved with just a mild deception. You know, nobody was hurt by this, I don't think, at least not in my opinion, and I salute him and his career and his great musical works. Today he's known by many as the godfather of exotica. Probably one of his last appearances was in Ed Wood with Johnny Depp doing a cameo as himself. The Randomizer came up with Speak to Me of Love, the only Korla Pandit album, honestly, that I have in my collection. It seems like, as with most fantasy things, this was released on black vinyl. More obscure version would be blue vinyl, and I've got the one that kind of probably lands in the middle of rareness, the red vinyl. Before moving on to number 5, again, if you have any weird record in your collection that you're really fond of, could be a funny shape, a funny color, a strange picture disc, it could be unusual content, or a bizarre backstory, or any of those combinations, or just something in particular that you'd like to share, by all means, put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Not a whole lot to say about this one. It's an early party record by Red Fox. The label, Duto, was owned by a gentleman by the name of Dootsy Williams. He was a record producer, created this label, and he was actually distributing gospel and doo-wop and comedy on the label. So kind of opposite ends of the spectrum to have both gospel and that party record thing happening. At this time, I think party records were still kind of sold under the counter. They could be considered as obscene material, and so they kind of got handed off in paper bags below the eyes of the law. You had to ask for that if you wanted it. Now, I believe this was probably on red wax because that's what was available at the time of pressing. I don't think that this was intended to exploit colored vinyl the way many pieces do. I do know that going all the way back into shellacs, that sometimes they would purposefully do that sometimes it was the color coding thing like Victor did early with their 45s, and sometimes it was things like Victor doing Holiday 78 I found recently that was on green wax for the promo copy to bring attention to it, and because green was kind of Christmassy, and so the label was white label but with red ink on it, and it made it more Christmassy in appearance. For the most part, though, it didn't happen that often. Like, I think most of the fantasy label stuff and things like this and things that were on Crown, often it was just using resources that were available to cut costs, and so maybe there was some surplus on the red vinyl somewhere, and this being a small budget label, this is what they happened to press on for at least a portion of this pressing, if not all of it, for this particular volume. Numerous records were cut from this series that have the exact same cover, just different volume numbers, by the way. So that's it for Weird Spins this time. Thank you again for checking it out, and please like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate you.